Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a conversation, an evening conversation with Don Peebles. We are excited to be able to welcome you to this great day and great event. I am Ralphine Caldwell. I'm the Executive Director for the LISC Charlotte office. We have on this call today, we have both cohorts. We have LISC Charlotte, who has the what's called the Ready Training Program, Real Estate Developer Incubator Program. We have our developers on that are all uplifting deals in the Charlotte office, as well as we have our LISC New York developers on here as well. And so we welcome all of you. The LISC Charlotte office, we started the Ready program about 6 weeks ago. They have all completed their training, 6 weeks of training. We're excited about that. They are actually having their networking event next week, as well as they're going to do a pitch competition in May, on May the 22nd. We are excited about that as well. And all of the developers for our program are either doing housing. We have 15 in our cohort. They're doing housing or they're doing commercial, other commercial retail development. We actually have 3 developers that already are going to be receiving funds that have deals in the pipeline for the City of Charlotte's Housing Trust Fund. So we're excited about that. But they're also making connections amongst themselves, as well as being able to make connections in the community. And we're just really excited about what's to come for our Ready Developer Training Program. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the LISC Charlotte LISC New York office for all that they have done to help us uplift our program, as well as to Red to Green, to Francisco and Will, for thank you so much for all that you've done for us as well. And of course, thank you, Don Peebles, for giving us your time this evening. We appreciate it. So I'm right now going to turn it over to the Senior Executive Director for LISC New York, Valerie White.
Thank you, Ralphine, and I'm going to correct you because you are no longer executive director, now senior executive director, and we're really thrilled to hear
I got to get used to that.
Yes, that's right. Embrace it, girl. We're really thrilled to hear that. And I'm so excited to not only be joined by LISC Charlotte and their first participants, but to celebrate the LISC Ready's program that launched and concluded this year. Ralphine and I have been talking about this partnership for well over 2 years, and we are just thrilled to see the program come to fruition. So again, good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie White, and I have the pleasure of serving as Senior Executive Director of LISC New York State. I would like to officially welcome and thank you for joining us for this very special session with my friend, Mr. Don Peebles. We are honored to host such an esteemed developer, as well as guests in our program regularly who share our commitment to building communities through real estate development. This event is one of many opportunities afforded to our cohort participants through our development training program. LISC was created with the mission of community development, and 40 years later, we continue to build connections between financial institutions and the communities that need them most. At LISC, we are driven by our dedication to investing in unrealized markets and creating sustainable communities. We invest in numerous programs and initiatives in areas such as affordable housing and economic development and job growth and workforce development, financial stability, and so much more. LISC New York created the Developers Training Program as a pilot initiative in October 2021 with the goal of helping mid-sized developers to reach the prime contracting opportunities that they have not been able to obtain at the time. Due to the program's rapid success, we are still here 7 cohorts later, having assisted 98 developers to enhance their businesses in ways such as funding and capacity building, resources, and project access. All right, so that's enough about us and our work, because I know you're all here to listen and learn from our esteemed guest speaker, Mr. Don Peebles. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce Don. Don is recognized as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the nation. Don is the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Peebles Corporation, one of the country's most active, privately held national real estate investment development companies. Mr. Peebles engages in practices of affirmative development to provide transformative economic inclusion and for minority and women-owned businesses within their multi-billion-dollar portfolio of projects in New York and Boston, Washington, D.C., Charlotte, Atlanta, Miami, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, all the major cities in the nation. Mr. Peebles is also the author of top-selling books, The Peebles Principles and The Peebles Path to Real Estate Wealth. He's a regular guest commentator on Fox Business, CNN, CNBC, and Fox News, and a highly sought after speaker who has addressed educational, business, and professional audiences across the United States. Mr. Peebles is a passionate proponent of mentoring programs that expose youth to the value of entrepreneurship, as well as an active political supporter and fundraiser for local, state, and federal campaigns of both major parties. He serves as an ambassador to the University of Southern California and on the board of directors of the YMCA of Greater New York. Previously, he has served on the National Finance Committee of President Barack Obama, the former chairman of the board of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, and is the former chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. So Don, thanks again for joining us. And in this session, who you have here in the audience are emerging developers and experienced developers from New York City and Charlotte, and many are developing all over the country like you. So the first question I wanted to ask you is to talk a little bit about your journey. How did you start and how did you get to where you are today?
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you for the kind words. But my journey was, I mean, like a lot of people, but I got the benefit of being exposed to real estate very early. My mother got her real estate license when I was 8 years old as a sales agent. And she got it because she was buying a home and saw the line item for commission and saw that the agent and broker made money with minimal effort and didn't spend a whole lot of time. So she thought she could do that. At the time, she was a secretary. She went, took a class in real estate and got exposed to it. Within a few years, she started her own brokerage business. And so that was my early exposure to real estate. And so my mother and my parents were divorced when I was 5. So my mother was a breadwinner in our household. And so real estate provided economic resources to us. And then it was, you know, the ups and downs of the real estate market or the ups and downs of our household. So I got a good understanding of the basics of the business as a kid. And then after, planning on being a physician and going into pre-med, quit college after my freshman year and started working in real estate as a sales agent. And then a appraiser, and then ultimately developing my first project, which was a urban redevelopment of an area that had been severely economically neglected in Washington, D.C., which is my hometown, and in Anacostia. And that the city had targeted that area for economic development. And I convinced them to pre-lease office space in a proposed building that would save them money when they moved out of their downtown office space into my building, and to stimulate economic development in an area that sorely needed it. And so 30 some odd years later, the city's still in the building, and the building helped kickstart economic revitalization that continues to this day in Anacostia. And but that's how I got started. And from there, I was able to build a business up locally in DC, and then realized that that skill set was portable, and then expanded into our first market outside of DC, which was Miami Beach. And then from there, it built the business, going forward. But I kind of learned as I went along, but I got good timing, some good fortune, and a little bit of basic knowledge to begin with.
And the next question I have for you is a little bit about challenges and hurdles that you face and how you have overcome them. But Don, we've also talked about some of the challenges and hurdles that we see that are systematic. And that's how you and I first began conversing. So we'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts on that as well.
Sure. I think so. I do think that being a developer of color, frankly, a Black developer in this country, especially early on in my career, poses a different set of challenges. Some opportunities because, in a political environment where the cities have diversity, there's a bit more of an effort to be more inclusive. But the challenge has always been that there's a double standard in terms of expectations, in terms of experience and competency, and the ability to make a mistake and be able to bounce back from that. I don't think that Black developers, or women for that matter, get the benefit of being able to make a mistake in a business prone to mistakes. And I think that there's also this double standard of how we measure opportunity. But the biggest hurdle that I've confronted as a developer early in my career, and deal with it every day, is access to capital. And one of the things that we all know about real estate development is real estate is a couple things. It's capital intensive. It's not like an app. I can come up with an app and build the app, test it out, raise a little bit of money, make some adjustments, keep proving my concept, raise more money as I go along. In the development business, you've got to have it all capitalized on the front end. And private equity plays a very important role in that space. And, real estate's a leveraged business, but you're going to need, 25, 30% equity to get a project developed. And many entrepreneur developers, most, don't put that kind of money into their projects. Private equity comes in and puts that in. And private equity is administered through individual human beings, and they bring with them their perspectives and their prejudices and their judgment with them. And so, that has been the challenge of our business as I've grown it from the one building that was $10 million to a pipeline of $6 billion or so, and several billion of projects completed, is that access to capital. In fact, if we sit here today, there's probably 87, $88 trillion invested in venture capital and private equity. And less than 1.3% of that's invested in firms run or owned by women and people of color combined. So that means 98.7% of all venture capital and private equity goes to white men. It's an absurdly unfair system. And in fact, I was listening to the comptroller of the city of New York proudly indicate that about 3% of the city of New York's $300 billion of pension dollars goes to Black businesses. And I'm like, wait a minute, but the city is 27% Black. So how equitable is that? And the reality is that there is systemic discrimination when it comes to the deployment of capital. And so I have fought that battle and dealt with it and suffered the ramifications of that throughout my entire career. And so I'm trying to do something about it now. A friend of mine and former long-term partner at BlackRock, he and I joined forces to form an asset management business. One of our first funds that we're actively raising right now, is for an emerging developer fund to provide equity, general partner and LP partner capital to emerging developers. And what's interesting is that I presented today to one of the larger banks in the country, and one of the things they asked me, well, we're not looking to deploy based on race. I said, no, nor are we. We're looking to find early stage developers. We're just going to use a wider lens to identify talent where we can de-risk our investments. And we think that providing capital to talented entrepreneurs who don't have fair access to it is good business. And so we think we can, create, transformative returns, and also at the same hand, get, some changes in our industry that hopefully demonstrate that this business model makes a lot of sense. So, but that's the number one challenge, is capital. And I think that right there parallel is a double standard. And the double standard is applied to when capital is allocated as well.
Right. Yeah. And as you know, we at LISC are capital providers, right?
Yes.
That's how we look to invest. And again, we also don't deploy by race, right? And that's become something that we talk about a lot in general, but a lot more these particular days. But we do believe, right, investing in what we see as unrealized markets, right? Mm-hmm. Unrealized markets have and for those of us that have done our MBA or our investment certifications, when you will look at an unrealized market that has not been invested in, you almost have it to yourself, right? To be able to really gain the returns that you're able to gain. So sometimes those markets require just a little bit of assistance and capacity building. Ergo, how we ended up developing the developers training program in the first place to pair those two opportunities together. And for us, and I know Ralphine, you're doing your networking, and this is your first cohort. We're on our 7th. We actually have done 8. We've done one with a group of alum, but we've invested over $40 million of our balance sheet capital over this period of time, which has leveraged another, 500 to 600 million. And these are affordable housing transactions primarily. Monica will correct me if I'm wrong, which are complex transactions. It takes really complex, analysis to get that done. So, we continue to, like you, feel that this is an important market that has an opportunity for returns that we think are just good business. So, and given some of the challenges that are happening right now, we have tariffs, and the interest rate is still where it is, right? It was not the 2% or whatever it was, right before COVID or the like. Those type things. What type of things do you think like the developers that are in these programs should be thinking about as they're moving forward with their projects? I'll quickly say one of the biggest things that comes up a lot in New York has to do with carry costs. When you have to carry the project till it's over. And of course, in New York City, which I know you've done business here, we have our unified land reform, the ULURP process, and this and that, and the city council member deference. So that adds on extra time. I know each municipality may not have all of those elongated issues, but what are some of the things that developers should be thinking about when they're entering into a project, given today's economic environment?
Well, I think that one should be looking in environments where the headwinds aren't at them. So like what you said about New York, I think that one of the challenges is why New York has one of the largest deficiencies in terms of affordable housing or workforce housing is it's very difficult to build buildings in New York City. And there are a lot of headwinds in terms of regulatory environments. And then the cost of carrying the property is also, extended. And that also makes it harder to make affordable housing work too, because your cost basis and your land is so, so significant that it makes it hard. And so the public sector has to step in and provide more of their land available for affordable and workforce housing. And fortunately, right now, there's 2 pieces of legislation in Congress, one to expand affordable housing, double the 9% tax credits, reduce the bond requirement from 50 to 25%. So there's some good things happening there. And then a workforce housing tax bill, which would also be, I think, very important. So if those things get done, if they can also, be paired with, places where there are, a pro-business environment. So for example, overall, Charlotte is an easier place to develop, say, than New York City. And there are other places. I think the first thing that developers need to do is look for markets where they can get their products, to market quickly. And also where there's a big need, but where there's also consistent public support for, especially if you're going to develop affordable housing, that you want to be in an environment that recognizes that the significant contribution of affordable housing, the necessity to have it, and the willingness to invest capital in that space, but also to expedite the regulatory process. And so that's where we look to do business across the board, not just in an affordable housing element, but also on our market rate and our luxury market rate. And I think that is one of the things that I would say in terms of looking for projects. I think the risk, of course, you highlighted it. It's the interest rate environment that's sluggish right now and still will not go down, and it needs to go down faster. But also the tariffs bring a lot of uncertainty to the marketplace in terms of cost and not only cost, but the availability of the materials necessary to build. And so to really understand that risk as a developer and to look to mitigate it by maybe pre-purchasing some of the materials that are at risk for a supply constraint environment. And so I think that's some of the things to focus on right now. I think though that if we look at the overall necessity for housing, there is 7 million units short in this country for affordable housing today. And last year we produced 66,000 units as a nation, and this year we're projected to do about 78,000. So even if we multiply production 10x, we'd still be a dozen or so years before meeting the unmet demand. And so there's a tremendous need for this. So therefore, ultimately our system will facilitate more incentives to get it built. And so it's deep market and a necessity to do it. And that's really the role of businesses, to meet the demands of our society and to make them somewhat economically viable, right? But at the same hand, we need to have a purpose to meet the demand. And workforce housing, there's a shortage in the country of market rate housing of 4.5 million units. And a large portion of those are workforce housing because, again, can't make the economics work. And so I think that's another area where there's great opportunity, especially if these two pieces of legislation get through. I think there's going to be a tremendous opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, the deficit seems like unsurmountable, and like what strategy, right? Could we think about as a nation to address this? And it's going to have to come from industry folks, right? The people that are on the phone here. Yeah.
Agreed. And I think also, though, it's going to need decisive political leadership. I think that at the end of the day, can't make everybody happy. I mean, the one thing that's frustrating in New York City is everybody is all supportive of affordable housing. They just don't want it built where they are. Yeah. And the same thing that I find in LA. Everybody, they need 500,000 affordable housing units, and yet everybody's on board with having them and forcing developers to have to build them. They just don't want them to build them where they are. And that's not an acceptable thing. I think that, frankly, we will benefit all for a more mixed income community where we don't have segregations of, based on economic income. And that's really what we have as a country today. We're more segregated economically than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a big issue. It's not as much of an issue in the other parts of New York State where we do business, but definitely in New York City. And I separately, and there's a little bit to our cohort members on the phone in New York. I am a commissioner on the New York City Charter Revision Board. And right now we're hearing public testimony through July on from the community, specifically on addressing the issues to have affordable housing happen more rapidly and having more production. Just look at the website if folks have had experiences that they want to be sure the commission considers, pop up. I've seen a couple of our cohort members there. One last question. I could talk to you forever, but there's folks on the phone, so I want to give them the opportunity to ask one last question. You have a couple of lines of advice for developers in this emerging mid-sized space that are looking to move to the prime. What would be the major piece of advice? You've shared some, but what would be your parting discussion point prior to asking questions?
I mean, I think that one of the things is that we shouldn't, as developers, especially women and people of color, should not fit just the one zone that people think we belong in. I think that there is this acceptance and this kind of placement of us in community development, community building. And I resisted that. First office building I built was a Class A office building. The first condo I built was an ultra luxury building. So I think that we should make sure that we don't allow others to impose these barriers around us. And we also don't put those barriers in our own heads. We really should try to mix it up. I think that long-term success comes from diversification. So as a company, we're product type diverse. I mean, we do luxury condos, luxury apartments, we do hotels, we do office buildings, and we do affordable. And we're going to do workforce housing too. And we are operating in 8 different cities, soon to be 10. And again, it gives us geographic and product type diversification. I think that is a part of the key here. But I think the other thing is to be much more knowledgeable and more demanding on fair access to capital. I think at the end of the day, I mean, development is a business of, of multiple chances. I know so many developers who have lost tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of their investors' money, given buildings back to their lenders, and turn around the next day and are building another building. And those opportunities aren't available to us. And so, but at least if these other developers are not succeeding and are not performing, then that means that the investors should be looking for other developers who maybe will perform. And that includes some of us. And I think that's where we need to expect better and demand better. And that's going to come through a political process, because the biggest investor in private equity and venture capital are public employee pension systems in New York City and New York State collectively have about $800 billion of assets to manage. And when you put in New York teachers and New York insurance, they're over $1 trillion. So if we could get some fair access to that, that would go a long way. And I think we have to advocate for that.
Thank you, Don. And just to let you know, I'm having meetings with those folks to get some of those dollars to wrap around some of the deals we have. We do some work with the comptroller, New York City. It's a small project, but looking to grow that access to that capital. But I do think it's important, and I'm certain, Ralphine in North Carolina is doing the same through the HFA down there. That's an active housing finance agency that's been doing this type of work for many years. So. Well, I'm gonna say thank you for chatting with me. I always appreciate you, and I'm gonna turn it over to Francisco, my friend, to engage with our folks on the Zoom call to ask their questions and facilitate that. So thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Valerie. Thank you, and Don, thank you very much.
Sure.
So we would love to open it up to our participants in Charlotte and in New York, get those questions going. And in the meantime, Don, you mentioned expanding into a handful of more markets. You've done some incredible work across, most asset classes, both regulated, free market, hospitality. I know you hate this question, but I got to ask it. I'm sorry. I really do. What is your favorite project, or what project do you sometimes think about that left a mark in your experience, or that you're exceptionally proud of? Maybe one or two. I know it's always hard to pick one.
Well, I would think my favorite, because it was the biggest impact, I think, on a neighborhood, and the biggest impact for us as a company was our first building in Anacostia, 2100 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, because that helped kickstart economic revitalization in Anacostia, which today now Homeland Security's got a $3 billion plus headquarter campus there, Department of Transportation's there, so many other agencies, and there's so much more housing built there. And so for that, it's the biggest impact in terms of just overall impact outside of our project. And then the second one would be the Bath Club, the residences at the Bath Club, because I bought the oldest social club in the Southeast United States. It was started in 1926 by Carl Fisher. Herbert Hoover was a member of the club, founding member of the club. And it was a club it was a restricted club, like most of these country clubs and private clubs. And the Bath Club was a country club on the ocean. And it didn't allow Blacks or Jews. And in 1996, I became the first Black member. 1998, I signed a deal to buy it. And then I ultimately developed ultra luxury condos. I restored the club and relaunched it in 2021. And it's one of the most inclusive but exclusive clubs in Miami. So it set a tone, and it kind of showed how far our country had come. And so that I'm very proud of, and I've designated the building a historic landmark, and so that we can all be reminded of what the history in this country was.
Wonderful examples, and I'm very familiar with that project in Miami. So we've got a few questions that have come in. The first one from Tyrone Harmon. What are the key factors that drove your expansion in other cities? It's a great question. And did you partner with other firms to understand those markets or develop solo? I think this is such a perennial question that all small and medium-sized developers, struggle with or think about. And so it's a great question. Thank you, Tyrone.
Well, good question. And mine was out of necessity. Um, um, the kind of double standard, was at play. I'm from Washington, D.C. I started my company in Washington, D.C. D.C. was a political city. One of my mentors was the mayor of the city, and who had been a transformative mayor for a decade, plus as mayor. And then, almost at the end of his third term, was arrested for drugs. And so he left office after finishing out his term. And then 4 years later, though, he came back and won again. And was in the middle of completing a deal with the city and the new mayor in terms of a project that we were going to develop to help provide to move the government employees off of what the site is now for the Capital One Arena, and where the Wizards and Capitals play, and the Mystics, and so we proposed 2 office buildings to be leased to the city. We're $58 million less expensive than our nearest competitor. But then the media attacked me because I was a protege of the former mayor who had come back, and they didn't want him to come back. And ultimately, I didn't win that deal. And frankly, I was shocked because I was so much better. And they hired the city council hired an auditor and a consultant, and they evaluated it and testified that we were $58 million less expensive. And the head auditor testified to the city council that they would be fools not to take my deal. They didn't take it anyway. And so I felt, okay, I wasn't trying to be $58 million less expensive. And 2, if I can't win under those circumstances, then it's not going to be a field that I'm going to be able to compete on. And so I went to take a bit. My son was barely 2 years old, not even 2 years old, a year old or so, maybe a little older than that, but not much. And so my wife and I took a little vacation to Miami Beach. And we liked it, got a vacation home there, and we're there New Year's Eve, 1995. I was reading a newspaper article about the city looking for a developer, a Black developer, to redevelop the Royal Palm Hotel as a part of the tourism boycott. And so I, bid on that and won it. And then that, brought me to Miami. And I used the skills that I learned in DC politically and so forth to do that. I ultimately partnered with a local partner, but our main partner was Intercontinental Hotels. So we had significant financial resources, and I wanted to do a 100% Black-owned development. So I brought in a couple of partners from DC. And the project, was a challenging project. We beat the mayor at the city council. He wanted another developer. We out-politicked him and had a better project. And but that's how I got there. And then, we kind of expanded from there, just looking at, once I realized that the skill set was portable, I figured I could do it elsewhere again. And so we began to look outside the market for it. And we, found some markets that were hospitable to us, but also that where we thought where we could add something to it. And then we just kind of grew the business from there.
What a fascinating story. And it sounds like that's about the time you ended up purchasing at the Bath Club. Sounds like that was sort of contemporaneous as you began to invest into Miami.
Yeah, once the Royal Palm got started, then it took us to another level. It was to be my first hotel. The first hotel I opened, though, was in an office building I converted in Washington, D.C. that I had bought from the Resolution Trust Corporation. But the Royal Palm being in South Beach, South Beach was getting a lot of, media and global attention. And so it got us on the map, per se. And then that allowed us to then use that platform to do some other things. And then the Bath Club followed it. And then that was something big, and it was the biggest deal I'd done. That project was back then about $170 million. So it scaled up. And so that, again, gave me some resources, and also, the demonstration that our skill set was portable.
Fascinating. And so such a great story in terms of what I like to say, real estate is a local blood sport, and I bet there's a lot of great stories there in that experience. All right, the next question from Joshua Brown. This is an interesting question, actually, and it's a bit of a pivot from what we've been talking about. But for those of us starting our own private funds to lend capital to each other, given the lack of access, what amount do you suggest we start with? 1 or 10 million? I would say 1 is very little. It's hard to squeeze out a living paying or charging interest, but it's a really interesting question in terms of participating in the real estate development value chain as a private debt capital lender.
Well, I think that where the opportunity is in providing capital is on the equity side. And so smaller dollars, you can invest in the general partner level and help the developer get the project going. I think any amount, frankly, is good to start with because you're getting started. And I think the number one thing about business is getting it going and just doing it. And once you get it started and you invest some money, that'll make it easier to raise more money. And then as you invest more, and you'll raise more. And so I would recommend, getting it in. I mean, the fund we're raising for emerging developers is $1 billion. And we've got two lead investors that we're working through, diligence with them on. But that's been a tough road to raise the capital for. We've got a conversion fund that we're making a lot more progress in. So, but I think that the thing is that raising, money, having the money to deploy right away, and then and you don't have to spread it out a lot. I think that the key would be that if you had $1 million, you deploy it in maybe 2 or 3 deals. That's it. And you have to, and that would be at the general partner level to where you're getting maximum leverage from the rest of the capital, and your smaller dollars can go further, and you can kind of, be able to get some big upside. So that would be kind of how I would look at it.
Wonderful. And in fact, I think you answered one of the next questions I was going to ask, which is, as someone looking to grow as a developer, what types of development projects or initial steps would you recommend for a new aspiring developer like me? This is from Rodman Gale, and I think your sage advice there addresses that question, which is just get started, get playing, get in the sandbox, and begin learning kind of the motions.
Yeah, what I would say is if you're capital constrained, then I would really look at affordable housing. I'd look at affordable housing because there's enough support for it out there, and you can do a smaller scale and still make that economically viable. You can find a niche, and it's one element of the development business to where skill and knowledge have tremendous value. As Valerie's talking earlier about this, it's a complicated process. It requires lots of layers of capitalization and so forth. And so if you can develop the skill set to do that, then that's valuable and creates value, as opposed to the capital creating the value. Like at the high end, especially in the market rate apartment buildings, it's a commodity, and it's capital that's creating the opportunities. There's not any ingenuitive thinking or some unique concept that creates that opportunity. So I would tell you that that would be where I would start. If I did it all over again if I couldn't have done that office building deal, I would have started with affordable housing. And just FYI, some of the most successful developers in the country, and probably one of the most successful developers, Stephen Ross, who owns the Miami Dolphins, he started off as a tax credit lawyer, and then saw what his clients were doing, and then started developing affordable housing himself, and then went on to go to the next level, which was the AOL Time Warner Center at Columbus Circle in New York, and Hudson Yards today. And what he learned, the most valuable thing, frankly, that Stephen learned in development came from affordable housing, both as a lawyer and the developer, was working with the public sector, because that prepared him to go compete for the AOL Time Warner Center site, which was a New York City Coliseum that had been closed, and then Hudson Yards, also public-private land. And so he got that skill set, and that's what created the base for him to build a business that enabled him to buy the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, a colleague of mine too, Michael Shaw, that ended up doing a lot of development in the meatpacking, started exactly like that, doing Section 8 housing as a tax attorney in Staten Island. And here's a sort of interesting tactical question to dovetail off of that. And so I think it ties into this sort of niche regulated space to play and develop and invest into. But the question from James Lonergan is interesting, which is insurance costs have gone up, they continue to increase, providers have been exiting the market. And they have seen providers be very resistant to underwrite or insure any project that provides supportive services, particularly that population is homeless. And I think this talks to your point about layering several different aspects of capital, timing. And so the question is, do you have any recommendations on how to approach getting insurance for projects with supportive services as they think about the funding, as they think about the financing?
Yeah, I think supportive services, frankly, one of the things, I think that the ideal partners, of course, are not-for-profits who actually do that work and commit to that work. And then you'll get some benefits from having them as a partner. You'll get, some tax exemptions, and you'll get, better, terms and coverage for insurance and the like. I think, though, that is where not-for-profits really should excel. And be involved, because that's where they bring significant value and allow you to do that. So that would be how I would approach it.
Wonderful. We've only got a few minutes left. Mr. Peebles has to leave us shortly, and we're very grateful for your time. I'm going to try and shoot a few off. A question from one of our participants: how can a Charlotte developer access your emerging developer fund, and what type of projects will you be looking to invest in? And what sort of returns are you underwriting?
Great. First of all, I'll let you know my flight's delayed for a few minutes, so I have about another 15 if you need it. So, and then secondly, we're looking for talented entrepreneurs who are going to do multiple deals. So we want to help developers grow. And so if we see if there's a plan of growth, and we see a capacity and skill set to be able to do that, then we'll do something on the smaller side. The goal is to do general partner capital, and that'll be in the range of $2.5 million to $10 million of general partner capital. And then we would do limited partner capital as well, and that would top off at probably $25 million. So that's kind of the zone there. And the idea also, a lot of public-private projects require local business participation by and large. And that means generally diverse businesses, so like a DC. So when I started in the development business in 1985, the requirement in DC was 35% minority business. Today, the requirement is 20% local disadvantaged business. So we've lost ground. And to this day, there's only a couple of developers who could actually do a project on their own in that market. So and part of that is because they don't have the capital. So one of the things we do want to do is we want to provide GP capital to developers so that they can partner with a national developer and go there and stand on their own 2 feet and say, we'll put in, half the GP capital, and we want half of the GP economics. And so that way we start empowering entrepreneurs, and they get, better returns. And so the way to get access to capital from us is to basically be thinking in terms of, we want bigger thinkers. We want people who are really looking to build businesses long-term, not one-off. And we really want, it's important that you want to build developments because, and you want to do them with a sense of fairness and equity, but you also need to build a very profitable business and have a focus of doing a profitable business. And so we want developers who have a sense of purpose, but a sense of accomplishment in terms of goals and economically, so that they can pay us back. And so anyone who has that, we'd love to do. I like Charlotte. I think Charlotte's a tremendous market, a city that's on the way to growing, and it's growing quite a bit. It's the second largest banking center in the country. We're committed to that market long term, and so we want to do more there. In fact, our emerging developer fund is going to focus on the 10 markets that we will be active in. We're active in 8 and adding 2. And Charlotte's one of the key markets for us as well. So we're going to be looking for entrepreneurs in those markets. And one of the things we're going to bring to that equation as well is we're a reasonably prominent development company, but most political leaders don't understand development. So they'll call us about a $20 million project or something, and we're just not set up to do that anymore. So ideally, what we want to do is just bring deals to our emerging developers and capital, so that way we can help them grow their businesses as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for reiterating what has been, continues to be supported by Valerie and Ralphine and their teams in New York and Charlotte, which is exactly what you said about purpose and vision, and that the larger capital is looking not to support a single project or deal, but looking to support you guys, you entrepreneurs that are here listening today, on building out your platform and scaling that platform over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And so that's really nice to hear. And you sort of lent yourself with your last comment to 2 questions. I'm going to combine them. One of them from Harold Lloyd and the other one from Joyce Holland. And effectively what Harold is asking, and you touched on this, is why are you, or what is the logic behind your expansion into these markets? What are the fundamental metrics that you're tracking that support your investment thesis in these new markets? And 2, I sort of want to combine this because I think it probably goes hand in glove. And that question from Joyce is NIMBYism. It creates a tremendous obstacle. What, in your opinion, are the biggest obstacles? And I would add the opportunities, to your point about having deep knowledge, regulatory knowledge, and being able to technically overcome those obstacles. I think maybe combining those questions from both of those participants.
Right. Well, so I think we look into different markets for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to ever be dependent on one market. If I were an office building developer in Washington, D.C., which is where I am right now, I would be out of business. The market has imploded. Values are down 50, 60, 70%. So I'd have been wiped out. And so, but by diversifying outside of D.C., that has enabled me to mitigate risk. And then 2, to diversify in terms of what we build also gives us further insulation and the ability to grow. And I've picked markets that I think have, one, I'm only interested in markets that have, racial diversity. I generally go into markets that have a significant Black population, and look to go in to those markets to break some barriers. And I look for markets that are growing. I think that there are the way especially post-COVID, the country and the way the country works and people live has dispersed out of just the major markets. I mean, New York is still the epicenter of entrepreneurship and creativity, but there are other places that have some competition for New York, a place like South Florida and the like. So I try to look for places where I think they're going to grow because of their fundamentals. I also think that the areas that are going to continue to grow are those that have diverse populations. I mean, most Americans and most global people who are coming to visit or coming to relocate are looking for a more diverse, culturally enriched environment. And so I think that's the number one thing. And then 2, we look for where there's expansion on the job market, but also that it's actually somewhat affordable to live in. Miami has run up to a real problem, for example, that they were a competitor because of affordability and cost of doing business. And now rents are as high in Miami as they are in New York. It's slowing down a little bit. So, but Charlotte, for example, you get a great city, but the cost of living is more in line with other parts of America, and I think that that's one of the things that allows companies to grow, and it gives a quality of life because people pursue quality of life, and so we look for those reasons, and that's how we kind of look to identify, and also a place I like. It's a company that I've built. I'm not trying to have a monotonous existence. I want to do different things and different challenges. And so I've tried to look at, using business as a tool of transformation. And also, I really haven't been, and this has just not been my thing, is that I'm not motivated. My motivation to do this was not money. I mean, my motivation to do it was to be doing some things that are consequential or somewhat transformative. And so I've approached it with looking for new challenges where I have the opportunity to do that, and then be able to figure out how I can make them make economic sense. And I take on projects that are harder. I mean, Charlotte, I'm doing Brooklyn Village, which is 18 acres in Uptown. That was a historically Black community. The Black community was removed and deceived by telling them they would come back, and never did. And so now I'm trying to make good on that, as well, and make good on that promise that's delayed. But that's a challenge for me and a great opportunity to help rebuild what was a historically Black community in a city that is very different today than Charlotte was back then. And so things like that, are motivators to me, and they attract me to different markets. I would say that Miami. I got to Miami because of the Royal Palm. It was a transformative opportunity to build the first, major Black-owned hotel in the country. And then, to do the bathtub was another thing, was a barrier breaker for me. So I looked at it for those. And then now Miami really is, okay, I'm going to build a luxury condo for very wealthy people. Great. I'll make money doing that, but that's not a transformative project. And it doesn't validate me as a human being. And so I look for markets where I think I can make an impact. Charlotte, we're going to phase one is going to be 6 buildings, and the first 2 parcels were going to be market rate housing. Well, because of the city's delays and so on, the interest rate environment changed. And so we had to delay what we were doing. And I said, look, I want to build something now. I told my son, look, we want to build something now. Our affordable housing requirement is 10% of what we build. So we probably end up building 35 or 50 affordable housing units. And I said, well, I'd like to do more than that. What could we do? He said, well, why don't we take a look at whether we can make the one of the parcels work for affordable housing. So he came back and he said, yeah, we can make the project work for a parcel work for affordable housing, and we could build 160 units or so of affordable housing, but you're going to have to discount the land. And I said, okay, well, show me the numbers. And he did. I said, okay, well, I'll do it if we could do 2, because I'd like to build over 300 units. And that was to make a statement. And the first 2 buildings would be, affordable housing in Uptown, which is amongst the most desirable locations in Charlotte. So that's what we're doing. And that makes the project more satisfying. I mean, so I try to do projects where I can do those kinds of things. And then at the same hand, we have to make some money so we can stay in business.
Yeah, and continue the mission, that double bottom line mission.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're invested in. And so we're again being respectful of your time. I will shoot 2 questions and welcome to answer only one or both, depending. I thought these were interesting. The first one is how do you see AI transforming real estate in the short and long run?
I think that it has a very transformative impact. We're using it now and have been using AI for about 2 years. What it's done is it's taken us probably from, I'd say it's taken us down from 6 analysts to 2. And it has taken us from when we go after a big project, we will bring in consultants and so forth. It's probably saved us about 80% on the consultant side for, when we do these RFPs and the like. And so it has done many things. And in fact, we're using it quite a bit. And in fact, I've used it now for some other purposes. And one of them is I was giving a speech before the MWBE conference in Charlotte in Albany, New York. So, and it was on Valentine's Day weekend, and I hadn't looked at my remarks or anything, and I was going to fly out there from East Hampton, and the weather was bad and it was snowing, so I had to. My driver drove me out, so I had some time, and I looked at my remarks, and I didn't like them. So I wanted to say something different, and so I opened up Perplexity, which is one of the platforms we used, and I said, I want you to draft remarks. I want the remarks to be bold. I want it to have a sense of inspiration. I want a challenge, and here are the things I want to cover. And I'd say within 30 minutes or so, I had a really good speech, and that really reflected my thinking. And that process would have taken my speechwriter, which I pay by the word, and about 4 interactions with my communications director to get to that. And so that showed me that the applications, for there. So we're now with our asset management firm, Donahue Douglas, one of the partners that we brought in. He was a 20th employee at BlackRock, and he created the Aladdin system, which is a risk management system for financial services, still being used today by the industry as a whole. And so we said, well, let's try to let's figure out how we can risk manage our asset management business on the office conversion business, and let's come up with something that does that. And he did come up with something as a patent pending for it. So we're using it a lot. And I believe it'll change the industry, and it will allow an entrepreneur. I could probably, with AI, have a $1 billion pipeline with probably 3 employees. So it allows you to do a lot. And so I think it's the way of the future, and especially the way of the future for emerging entrepreneurs, and will not necessitate a larger back of house as much. And so I think it will level the playing field significantly. No more will it be that someone who has a team of 50 people be perceived as more capable than someone with 5. So I think it's a very powerful tool, very powerful.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I've been using it every single day in some fashion or form with a large organization. Whatever we do, we cannot let Ralphine and Valerie AI us, okay? So we must create NIMBYistic obstacles to that as much as we can. Sir, I know we're at time, and really want to thank you for your wisdom, for your participation. You really are a tremendously inspirational human being, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and being so candid with us here today.
I appreciate you having me. And by the way, I want to say, and I hope the audience can hear this, I think what LISC has done for decades. I mean, I can remember when I was building 2100 MLK, LISC provided the funding for 632 H Street Northeast, which was to start rebuilding the H Street corridor. And they provided the equity to the H Street Community Development Corporation to get that project going. And so they have made tremendous impacts on businesses and entrepreneurs and developers to level the playing field all over the country. In fact, have helped us in the past on our affordable housing efforts, and continue to hopefully to do that. So, I mean, I think, LISC is really an example of what can be done with capital that is willing to cast a wide lens and to want to make an impact. And you've done that, been extremely successful strong returns and use those returns to put back into the community. So we're all very fortunate that you all are here. And of course, Valerie has also done something that spoke out about this key issue about access to capital, wrote a nice op-ed piece about this issue that certainly inspired and challenged me as well, and made me feel like I'm not out here on my own on this issue. And so I want to thank Valerie, Rafine, and you, Francesco, and everybody else for the great work that you all are doing to help level the playing field. And I hope to be a good partner for you all as we continue to do this effort to laying leveling the playing field. And hopefully we'll work together as we deploy capital to emerging developers, because that is, I think we do that, we really change our communities and make them far better. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.